Hello again. I'm Ted Cunningham, President of the Executive Forum. The dinner will continue, but I'm really pleased to introduce Mr. Jordan Kimmel, our speaker. Mr. Kimmel, certainly one of our most popular speakers and most informative, regularly appears on CNBC and Fox. And I'd like to note something. His magnet process is currently ranked #1 over the last 5 years and over the last 10 years of all active portfolio managers by the American Association of Individual Investors. Mr. Kimmel.
Thank you so much, Ted. Well, let me first start by saying, let me thank you to a real good and great old friend, Larry Burke, who I think we determined today are celebrating our 15-year friendship. So Larry Burke, Ted and Arlene and the entire New York NYU Stern Group, I want to just thank you for having me back. It's really been a pleasure. I want to mention the last time I spoke here was around right at the bottom of the market, incredible time. I have some fun things to share with you if talking about the economy and the stock market can be fun. I also want to just mention before I really start the comments here, we lost a real dear friend this month. Anybody here friends or know Marty Zweig? Yeah. Dear friend, great guy in the business. I want to just really make an acknowledgement. And one of the things that I learned from him and back in the green rooms of CNBC and Fox is people would say to me, Jordan, you're too optimistic. You're too bullish. And Marty made a living, a shtick of telling everyone how worried he is all the time. So I want to mention I worry a lot about important things, but I'm going to share with things why I really don't worry as much as others. But I just want to couch this and frame this in a way that Wall Street, Main Street are really, really scared to death now. And I want to kind of shed some lights on really what I'm seeing in the markets, what I'm seeing throughout 25 years of being in the business. I had to say something for Marty because he taught us to worry. And I'm worried too, but I'll share with you why I'm not worried as much, okay? So I'm Jordan Kimmel. I am the manager of the Magnet AE Fund. Rather than talk about the fund itself today, what I really want to do is share some what we're not going to talk about, what we are going to talk about. We'll poke some fun at Wall Street. And again, this is what we're not going to do. If you read the caption, I retire on Friday, I haven't saved a dime. Here's your chance to become a legend. Wall Street's a tough place to be, okay? And if you haven't saved a dime and you want me to be a legend by Friday, meeting's over, okay? But I do know that there's some people that have to catch a bus or a train at 9 or 9:30. My curfew is midnight, so let's just have some fun and let's really see what's going on in the market and what are things all about. So let me kind of share this other kind of fun note that hangs in our office. And Jeff Hirsch is with me here from the Stock Traders Almanac. We'll talk about him a little later. And it starts with a quote from Sir John Templeton, one of the greatest. Bull markets are born on pessimism, grow on skepticism, mature on optimism, and die on euphoria. But there's a lot of realism in here, and Main Street loves to buy at the high or when everyone's enthusiastic. In '09, if you remember, I was kind of ringing the bell, banging the drum, and telling you this is a generational buy. It was very hard to see at that time, but we don't want you to buy high and sell on fear and repeat till broke. Folks, that's for other people. We could do a little bit better than that, okay? So what's really important here is kind of making sure, I think, that you're diagnostic and not predictive, and sometimes don't even take yourself that seriously. But these are some of the smartest people in the entire business industry and how bad they got it by just simply not thinking long-term enough. So let's look at the first comment, Western Union. Telephone, too many shortcomings. Really no inherently value to us. Right? By the way, Western Union was sold out of bankruptcy. The new symbol is not the old company. I'll jump a couple. Airplanes are simple, are interesting toys, but of no military value. Well, you don't want the French fighting your wars. All due respect to everyone French. More importantly, guys who are in the business, in a particular industry, titans in an industry, who wants to hear actors talk? Right? That was right before talking pictures. The chairman of IBM, maybe there's a world for 5 computers. Maybe there's a market for 5 in the world. And if you were in the business or you were trading stocks when I was first getting into the business, digital equipment was trading about $200 a share as one of the darlings. They're also defunct. There's no reason for an individual to have a computer in their home. Maybe these people just simply weren't thinking long-term enough. But I want to take it further to really what the goal of investing is. The goal of investing is not to have the highest return of any year, although we've tried to do that and we've accomplished it in the past. It's really about maintaining your purchasing power. In my first book, and rather than kind of offer to sell books at the end of the night, we're going to give some books away. We'll have some fun with it all. But I actually love to read and I love to follow the top folks that came before me and see what they were saying. So I was born in '58, I'll date myself. And think about what inflation has actually meant. We've talked about this with a few guys before, but the talk started. They're saying inflation right now is about 1%. Anybody believe that? Anybody believes around 1%? Well, 50 cents for a haircut, they must think I'm crazy. If the minimum wage rises to $1, no one will be able to afford outside help. These are things people were saying in '55. They kind of weren't thinking about what really comes down to purchasing power and what inflation really is all about. So let's kind of get into what I want to talk about tonight a little bit. What are you looking at? And what's the media telling you, and what are you feeling, and what are you thinking? And I think I'm going to share some reality with you that the media, for whatever reason, bad news sells, fire sells, we know what sells. We'll talk about what's really going on. But this is actually a picture from a John Templeton slide years ago. And you could see it's a mirror image. The guy's looking at his shoes and seeing everything down, 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 down. Well, I'll point out to you, one of the interesting things is in the lost decade that we all just lived through, the global GDP doubled. Okay, and by the way, we'll start to give out some books. What percentage of the world's population lives in the United States? Go ahead.
5%.
Or less, slightly less. But we're very U.S.-centric, we're very U.S. concerned. The fact is there's some unbelievable things going around the world, and importantly, things going on in the United States as well, and we'll kind of get into all this. So why is it so hard for us, and why do we all struggle as much as we do? Well, the headlines are really, really tough. They really are. Gasoline, little is certain, but high prices. What if interest rates go up? It's going to destroy the market. The dollar jitters, and of course, no one's working in America anymore. Companies go abroad. Who wants to share what the punchline to this all is? Anybody? These are headlines from 1974. Okay, when the Dow was about, Jeff? 570. About half of 1,000. Okay? These are all headlines from '74. I don't want to get into how much debt we have, all the other problems, but these things will recycle and we'll kind of touch on them again. But these are headlines, folks, from '74 that kept people from investing when the Dow was a little over 500 and currently banging on new highs around 15,000, okay? So what's driving the market these days? Okay, so I'll talk a little bit throughout the evening about magnet, and I do have a very deep math background. The magnet is all about simply identifying the best and the worst. But even having a model that is able to identify and separate companies, I know 50% of the time at best, it's about fundamentals. Half the time it's about psychology, what people are really feeling. These days, it's not even 50-50 anymore. The market's being run by emotions. Psychologically, why would anybody put money in at 0% and lock it up a long time other than psychological fears and worries? But this is really what's driving the market and continues to drive the market. So here I want to have just a drop of fun. I want to show two slides that I showed back a couple of years ago, right here at the National Arts Center. And what I basically talked about was that there's something incredibly easy for all of you to have in your toolbox, and it's simply called the yield curve. And what it basically says is when short-term interest rates are way lower than long-term interest rates, it simply fosters growth. Okay, I'll go one step further. There has not been a single recession in this country, not a single recession when the yield curve is positively sloped like this. Now, when short-term rates are higher than long-term rates, sometimes it causes a recession, sometimes it doesn't. But when long-term rates look like this, folks, you could make any excuse you want. The Fed's pumping the economy. This is all artificial. This is what I said then. The interesting thing is if you really are following the markets carefully, the slope looks almost identical, except the long-term rates are now under 2, and the short-term rates are at 0. It's the same exact yield curve. The Fed is promising you. The Fed has said it. The Fed has promised you they will prime the pump until they don't want to anymore. When will that happen? Call me, talk to me. I'll show you what an inverted yield curve looks like. This is one of the steepest yield curves in history. And I'll just repeat it again. There has never, ever, ever been a recession in this country while the yield curve is positively sloped. And it's one of the strongest slopes you'll ever see. So stop worrying as much as Marty's why. Just think a little bit. Go outside the box. This is another slide that is actually a couple years old. I didn't even want to update it. What this is basically saying is that I can't tell you decisively, and I never will be able to tell you what the market's going to do next. But if you have a fireplace in your house, have ever been around the fireplace, the most telling, most important thing is how much fire is left to come in. You could look at a raging, raging fire. If there's no wood left, that fire is going to burn down. You could look at a tiny little smidgen of a red amber. When there's a ton of wood sitting next to that fire, there's a fuel to drive that fire. This slide goes back to saying that cash was at historical highs. Now, these points that are at the high, this is 1981 when I got out of college and the country was done. The country was over. Jeff, where was the market in 81? About 700, okay? We saw another spike in 01, by the way, at the bottom of the market. And then we saw another spike in 09. And I said to people, there's so much cash on the sidelines. There's so much cash waiting to come in. Now, if we updated this chart, that line would go through the roof because we know that the market has more than doubled. The stock market has more than doubled. I would guess there's still a lot of cash in a lot of accounts around this room and a lot of this country. This is just the way it works. What we're trying to talk about is kind of understanding the market environment, the market psychology, and then we could take it a little bit forward. But when there's this much cash on the sidelines and the yield curve is so positively sloped that I will continue to worry, but I will worry from a magnet's point of view. And what do I mean by that? Well, we'll get into that right now. Well, one of the things that I shared at the last meeting, this was one of the most important times, frankly, of my life when I came here last time. I said that I was going to temporarily stop managing other people's money, and that I was going to create something and form something called Trust Across America. And I really encourage everybody here to go to that website and see what we've done for the last 3 years, because in addition to Magnet, we've done something about the most trustworthy companies and a new model. But what it is that media negativity just is a big problem. I'll share a real quick story on a Fox show, one of my first times when I went willing to go on something called Bull and Bear, and they said, give me 2 stocks, Jordan, and some guy just ripped me apart about how dumb I was, how this was a bad idea. The lights went from red to off, and the guy said to me, I'm buying that stock tomorrow. I love that idea. This is entertainment. And I was like, what? Are you kidding? But that's what it is. It's entertainment. And they're there to sell you the next number, the next earnings report, the next economic number. And they know that the more negative they are, the more they could sell, the more they could debate. And the guy turned around and said, I can't believe you're going to buy this stock tomorrow. He said, well, I know you and I love the idea, but this is showbiz. So I just want to kind of share that with you. In this environment where there's a race for high-speed trading, patience has all but disappeared. And really importantly, people aren't asking, what can I do with my money? What kind of return can I earn? They're simply saying, I want a return of my money, not a return on my money. Give me 0%. And I have a kid at home who was in high school. He said, Dad, nobody will invest at 0%. And I said, you should see the oversubscription in treasuries. People want 0% because they think it's safe. Well, we're not going to talk about inflation right now. We know it's currently running way above what's reported. We can kind of get into all this, and I think it's really interesting. But one of the questions comes to be is that I know there's a lot of problems in the world. I know there's a lot of problems in this country. What is it that actually enabled me in 2009 to invest like I did, last year to invest like I did, and right now to see going forward? Well, what I actually believe is Magnet itself is a 25-year-old, very, very quantitative model. And it looks at so many different variables that I'm not going to sell you on Magnet. That's really not what I'm here to do. What I'd love to do is I'd love to share it individually with you and share why these books have done what they've done and why we've done what we've done. But we look at a combination of value, growth, and momentum. There are so many variables that go into this that what I really believe the most important thing just to get right to the chase is that there's a bell curve in life, okay? And a lot of mathematicians and academia like to say, how fat is the tail? How long is the tail? What we all know way more importantly is that 90% of everything is average. So you go into the law of large numbers, the average height of a building, the average width of a hair, the average weight of a male or a female. All of these things fall under a bell curve, and it's really fascinating. And when I was in graduate school, I basically said, if there's really a bell curve, how could you buy everything in the stock market? Why doesn't people want to solve for the very, very best and the very, very worst? And really, I think that's what Magnet has really been all about. And so I'm not here to say companies are good or bad or the market is good or bad, but there's a belief right now that all American children are fat, dumb, stupid, don't do their homework, and play video games all day long. And I'll say that might apply to some kids. Probably doesn't apply to everyone. Who thinks that applies to everybody in America or around the world? It's foolish. Nobody would believe that. But that's what they're talking about, the average company, the average everything, the average nothing. So here's something that I kind of want to, I chose a subject called Seeing Through the Fog, because that's what media tends to do to you. And when I picked that topic, what did Time Magazine do for me? They wrote a cover story that helped me prepare today. Anyone see Time Magazine last week? It's called Made in America. Okay, so to make it really, really easy for you is let's ask a question here to give away the first book, okay? Because everyone likes a book, maybe? So what do Apple, Airbus, BMW, Rolls-Royce, Volkswagen, and Samsung all have in common? Don't worry about getting the question wrong, folks, because no one's going to get tossed out, but the right answer gets a book. High technology project, close. Manufacturing, and a little bit further, all of these companies have all just built plants in the United States. Every single one of them. Now, right now, VW, Volkswagen, just put on a third shift. Okay? What we're talking about here, really interestingly, they're saying that 7.4 times is the average wage in the United States for manufacturing of China. But there's something called relative labor productivity, and it's driving insourcing. It's driving insourcing. Anyone hear that word lately? It's driving insourcing. Now, there's Detroit, which was kind of beaten up by the unions a lot. You go down to South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, Samsung, Airbus, BMW, Rolls-Royce, all building plants in the United States. Now, does that make me a bull on the United States? No. Because I go right back to this slide that says all we're interested in is the tip of the bell curve anyway. But this idea that America is dead and the global world is dead, there's actually relative labor productivity driving insourcing. That's an amazing statement. Anyone hearing that on Main Street media right now? We're not hearing it at all. Someone said back there they're all obsolete. Samsung, BMW, Apple, Airbus, these companies are really not obsolete. Okay? So let me go to the next slide, which is one of my most fun slides at all. But wait a second. Someone said manufacturing. Come on. I can't hold back the book. Wow. I can't hold back the book, okay? So here's another really critical, important thing, though. How many companies are in the S&P 500? Nobody gets a book for that. Okay? However, here's the real question. Since 1950, how many companies have stayed in the S&P 500? How many companies, to make it clear, were in the S&P 500 in 1950 and are still there? And don't be afraid, because you get a book if you're close, and if you're wrong, nobody heard your answer. 100, 48. Who said 20? You're really, I'm not going to let any, you're close enough. So you're going to get a book when I'm ready, but before we're all, I'm going to give you this book, but this is important. The point is that something like 50, everyone's got their own number, 50% of all Americans are working in industries that didn't exist in 1950. Think about that. Not only companies that didn't exist, but industries that did not exist. Now, what's going on, and I have updated this slide, I've kept a few things. Biotechnology, clean tech were in my last slide. Now this whole thing about 3D manufacturing, 3D printing. But I'll tell you something really fascinating, because we want to beat somebody up. We talk about jobs going overseas. More jobs are being lost to robotics than they are to overseas at this point. And so you look at AT&T and you look at the old operators that would say, one ringy-dingy, two ringy-dingies, and connect you. Well, those folks obviously don't exist. Those jobs are never coming back. Those companies are more efficient, more profitable than ever. So what we have here is actually new jobs and different jobs. And what they talked about is the biggest semiconductor manufacturing plant in the world is where? Where? USA. It's in Albany. In Albany, the largest single semiconductor manufacturing plant. There's different jobs, and what they talked about, where the batteries coming from, GE in the United States. But these plants are different. These plants don't have tens of thousands of people working there. They're different jobs. So if people are upset that jobs aren't coming back, it's not because they're outsourced, but what if you could actually identify the companies that were profiting from this technology? What if some of them were in the United States and some of them were abroad? Wouldn't you want to own these? That's really what this is all about. So whether there's going to be drones, clones, automobiles, here's the one thing I can promise you. I am not smart enough to tell you what's going to happen next. That's the thing I pride myself on. People who want to tell you the future are kind of charlatans, they're imposters. We could tell you what's going on now and what trends are going on, but where the jobs are going to be in 10 years and 20 years, we don't know. What we do know is that there's a model that asks questions, things like, who's got the highest increase or acceleration in cash flow? Those are the companies we're investing in. We're not trying to be political. We're not trying to be future tellers. We're simply trying to use the top diagnostics available. So here's kind of where I kind of cut my teeth and made my name, if I will. Back in 1998, 97, I went on CNBC and said, earnings are totally manipulated. And they said, are you willing to say that on TV? And I said, yes, I am. The problem is earnings manipulation is still going on. So I want to share with you, there's a guy I know in my neighborhood, and thank goodness he recently retired. Because what he did is he sat on the board of several large companies. And he said to me, Jordan, this was his quote, regardless of the economy, the market conditions, or any individual stock, I can always make the companies beat by a penny when it comes to issuing quarterly returns. And I got sick to my stomach when I heard that. But it still goes on. It's legal, it's allowed, and 20 years later, people are still talking about bottom line earnings. Now, I believe companies have to be profitable. There's simply way, way better ways to look at it. So one of the things that Ted was nice enough to say, there's a group called the American Association of Individual Investors. And they've been following Magnet from 1998, from the book I gave away already. It actually shows the model, by the way. It shows the model. It shows you exactly what I look at as transparently as possible. And that model's been followed by AAII. You can follow it yourself. It's a great website. It is the highest return of any active manager for the last 5 and 10 years. Now, there's flaws with their model. I'm not managing money for them, but it's a great place to follow me. What I mentioned 3 years ago with a lot of excitement right here was Trust Across America. And I said that for the couple years going forward, I would not manage other people's money. Well, one of the great phone calls I received last year was from Jeff Hirsch at the Stock Traders Almanac. And most people know the Stock Traders Almanac. It's in its 47th year, and Jeff said to me, Jordan, would it be okay if we actually dedicated this year's 2013 to you? And I said, wait a second. Did you say in memory of? Is there something I should know? And Jeff said, not only that, but what they have done is things like the presidential cycle, the best 6 months, and things that are quoted on Wall Street over and over again. So Jeff, let's give away one of your books. This is an almanac. It's one of my favorite books that comes out every year. And the question that we kind of figured out was, is anyone familiar with something called the presidential cycle of investing? So I'll put you on the spot. You can earn a book, but anyone else can because it's only 4 years. Which of the 4 years of a presidential cycle tends to have the highest return? Who said second? Next. First. The last. Good guess. Who's what? Third. Hey, numbers were working with you. Numbers were working with you. And there's a reason for this, though. There's really a reason for this, is that, and I could let Jeff get into this, but the fact is that what's really important here is that Jeff and I are now partners. I am now managing money for individuals again for the first time again in 3 years. Not because we think this is a bell-ringing moment in the bottom of the market, and Jeff is appearing on CNBC and Fox, frankly, more than I am right now. He's got a great book out, which is a scary title, called Dow 36,000. 38,820, sorry. But we're not looking for that to happen anytime soon. The fact is we're probably more cautious than most people on Wall Street right now. But what I'd really encourage you to do is not to ever listen to a talk, but to actually follow up and let us show you what Magnet is really all about, why the Almanac enhanced version of Magnet is probably what I think is going to be something for the next 10 years that people are going to really want to know about. And as importantly, or kind of importantly, is the most trustworthy companies in America, because I think that actually hits a heart note. It's mathematically valid. I'd love to talk more about that itself. But I think that what I wanted to talk about here for just a minute is that I don't consider myself at this stage of the game, at this level of my career, finished. I think I'm a student of the market. I continue to read more than I did in high school. I continue to read more than I did in college. And one of the great books that I've read, and it was just this summer, was by Ken Fisher. And I really think we ought to bring Ken here to speak. Ken is a great guy, but one of the things he talked about, and he wrote this in '09 at the bottom of the market, he said, one of the big problems in the media is that people complain that after a recession, the unemployment number's fake. And that really people are totally unemployed. The number's not real. And this comes up after every recession. And I mentioned already that the global GDP doubled in the last decade. There's a lot going on around the world. Not only in China, not only in India, but all through Latin America. There's incredible growth taking place if you travel. It's a matter of really identifying really the top and the bottom, the best and the worst. So let me be really clear here right now that one of my favorite quotes is Harry Truman. And Harry Truman said, I was the whole life in search of a one-arm economist. The guy who wouldn't get up and say, but on the other hand. And you don't hear me saying about the other hand. What I'm really, really clear about is that there's a lot to be worried about, but more importantly, there is a bell curve. And the bell curve speaks very clearly that there are winners and losers, and it's not about the market, and it's not about America or India or China or Latin America. It's about individual being able to drill down and use diagnostics. So what I love to share is that at this stage of my career, the thing that has empowered me is the concept that I know I don't know the future, and that's okay. I don't know what's going to happen next, but imagine if you could take an individual and every single quarter put them through a diagnostic set of examinations to say that maybe this 30-year-old's not healthier than this 50-year-old. It's all a matter of using the diagnostic abilities to separate the top from the bottom. It's a matter of being able to really separate your emotions from what you wish, think, or hope would happen, and ask yourself what actually is happening, and let me get on the right side of a trend. So what I believe going forward is that I banged the drum, I rang the bell here in '09. I hope a couple people listened, but more important than that is I do believe that the best time to plant a tree again is now, is today. And I'm not saying that this is the time that you want to be bullish on America or bullish on the stock market. I think you need to be diagnostic, and I think you need to be unemotional. And the whole secret of Magnet has been being unemotional. And now at this stage in my career, almost 30 years in the business, we have a tried and true cycle expert, the Stock Traders Almanac, that's combining to Magnet stock selection process. And the most important message I could give you is I'd love to come back. I'd love to continue to share what I think. But I think that you need to take the emotions out, understand the media is always going to find something negative tomorrow to talk about. And you just need to be able to be more diagnostic than forecasting. And I believe that the best times of America are probably behind, but I'm not drumming the beat on America. I'm drumming the beat that we had a conversation with somebody earlier. There's only two ways to invest. There's only two ways. One of them is to lend money. And right now you can lend money to the government at 1% or some corporate bonds at 3% or whatever you want to do. Or you could decide to own something. And if you own something, that's where all the capital wealth is established. Lending money is a loser's game. But the most important thing I could say is that don't let the media keep you under the mattress, under fear that tomorrow's going to end, because I've walked on Wall Street now for 25 years. I've yet to get hit by a piece of falling sky. It's not going to happen. You need to just pick your head up and look into the horizon, and we need to go forward together. And I want to kind of end here and open it up for questions before it gets too late. Anybody have anything they're thinking about that they want to ask so that they could go ahead first, Ted?
Gold. What is your opinion of gold?
Okay, so I was very clear with one of the, let's just get right to the answer because there's a lot of questions maybe. Gold just had a 10-year bull market. What I think everyone should be interested in is asset classes that haven't enjoyed a 10-year bull market already. And I think what we got to happen is, in the words of Warren Buffett, in the words of the best investors, you have to buy when everyone's afraid, and you have to sell when everyone's enthusiastic. Ted, when I saw vending machines show up where you could put in a couple $1,000s and get a little piece of gold, they were ringing the bell then. And I think that if you're willing to hold gold for the next 50, 100 years, you'll be fine. If you're willing, the next 2 or 3 years might not excite you as much as the prior 10. I think the bull market's done there.
With all the currents that are going on, the cheap gas in the United States, variety of instabilities and companies for a variety, some political and some economic reasons, bringing things back into this country and building of new oil supply pipelines and gas pipelines. As you said, we should be more not necessarily optimistic, but not so pessimistic about it.
About our country itself? Well, let me just say something to you. You know, I know some people up in North Dakota, and what's happening there could be a monumental event for this country. You're hearing about thousands of jobs here. We should be hearing about hundreds of thousands of jobs there. You know, and I'll ask you this question because the immigration law is kind of a big issue right now. I'll ask you right now to kind of close your eyes and go under the premise that anybody, anywhere in the world can now get a Social Security number and work in the United States and pay taxes. Anybody can come tomorrow. What would the line look like? Mine would wrap around the circumference of the equator over and over again. And the reality is that years ago, I blended value growth and momentum when they said you couldn't blend it. I actually think the United States is a combination of growth and value. And the fact is, there's a tremendous value in our country itself and the natural resources. But when I was a kid, there was 200 million Americans. Now there's 330 roughly. In China, they just build cities. Okay, we could actually build cities here, and people will come. And right now, in the last year, Rolls-Royce, BMW, Airbus, Samsung all announced new manufacturing plants here. There's a tremendous story ahead, and I think this growth and made in America is actually in the early stages. I think it's going to shock people. And I'll also tell you that the exact same names that invested in Genentech and Amgen and Sun Microsystem are all investing right now in clean tech. And the future is in technology and biotechnology and clean tech. We don't even know the names of those companies yet. Magnet will find them. And I think you just have to ask yourself the same series of questions. Anybody here, by the way, own their own business? Okay. So let me just digress for 1 second. Anybody know the definition of a beta in the stock market? They call it a beta. Anyone want to throw it out? The old definition or the new one? You give your one. Okay, so there's a new definition of a beta. The old one was earnings before interest, taxes, and amortization. There's a new definition. Anybody? Earnings before I trick the damn accountants. Okay, and the point is that if you own a business, it's about cash flow. It's about accelerating cash flow. It's not about how many eyeballs are on your website or any kind of, thing you can mention, because companies actually need to pay taxes, interest, and amortization. So this whole concept of before that is nonsense. What I'm interested in is identifying through a mathematical process those companies that have the combination of accelerating revenues and margins and cash flow. And so, question, and I think I owe a book out, but I have another question I want to ask. Go ahead, please.
What do you think is going on with, even though the economy seems to be growing, commodities, copper, are declining?
Yeah. Okay, so let me actually, we might not have enough time for this, but Jeff Hirsch here is one of the great market cycle timers. And he has a nice expression. Jeff, 2 words. What's it called? A copper top. And it's a cool expression. But when copper makes a top, it's important. And in 2007, it felt like things were just going gangbusters, and copper made a top. And by the way, the yield curve also inverted. And people said, but don't pay attention this time it's different. And we went into a real deep issue. So the point is, what you're bringing out is something extremely important. And just to share, some details from Jeff's book. The Stock Traders Almanac and some very smart people, and people I respect too deeply not to pay attention to, are looking for the Dow Jones to go back under 10,000 again. So we didn't start our new fund to say this is a generational buy. We know we can look for the companies that have the fastest deceleration in revenues, margins, and cash flow, and it's not un-American to short stocks. And then there are those companies that actually have accelerating profit margins and cash flow. One of them happens to be Albany, a company up in Albany in semiconductors. So to answer your questions explicitly, don't be surprised if there's some real rough waters ahead. And I'm not giving you the same message I gave you in '09. In '09, I banged the drum. Now I'm saying you have to be extremely selective. I'm not afraid of a bear market. We know how to handle it. We expect to be in a bear market again. And that's as direct as I could be. There's no buy going on here right now.
So just to clarify, the company's global foundry that you're talking about, and in Saratoga and Albany, is that the chip plant, is that what you're referring to?
No, I'm talking about in Albany.
Okay, what company is that?
AMRI is one of the symbols up there, but the thing is there's actually, it's Schenectady. Time Magazine talks about GE's new plant. But I'm talking about, now I had an intern from Albany last semester. He didn't know about this plant, and I'll be happy to share with you exactly what the plant looks like. There are now drawing boards, although the largest plant is in Albany. There's a new plant already with blueprints out that's going to be twice that size, and it's also going to be in Albany. I'll share it with you.
Two questions.
Sure.
How do you think Obamacare, when it kicks in, will affect the economy? And two, your points about MLPs.
Okay, so two things. MLPs are great if you have a good accountant and don't mind paying a little extra for filing fees. The income that comes off them could be great. And we know that income is important to a lot of people at different stages. So MLPs are good, but they're all in context of what's going on at the individual company. So I think that Buffett's smart enough to know that oil and gas has to move around a lot. He's not looking for enormous growth in his portfolio. In that sector, he's saying, give me 8-9% income and don't lose my money. And in a 1% treasury market, that's not a bad investment. So 8-9% is good, and so I actually like them, and I think you need to be selective with them. As far as Obamacare, I didn't memorize all 2,000 pages. I'm not sure one senator or congressman did either. I think it's probably a travesty. I think that while I didn't vote for him, I'd love to say that I hope by the time the new election comes up, the economy and the market is so strong they give him a third Bloomberg term. But I doubt it. And I think that when you talk to businessmen and throw an uncertainty level as high as healthcare, it's an issue. So let me just kind of take this one step forward, and this is something I talked about on Fox a lot a couple years ago. I said, just folks, do the math. First of all, a lot of you guys probably live in the city, don't drive that much. But if you did drive a lot, the average American will drive 12,000 miles. You do the math, $1 increase in the price of gas, it's going to be about $500. It's probably not going to create a lot of yes or no decisions based on that. But healthcare, which is going up at 14, 15, 16% per year, which is a much larger percentage of a budget, is an actual problem. So I leave it to the politicians. And by the way, I'll share with you out of Ken Fisher's, I didn't want to get political here, Ken Fisher, who I love, actually came out with the definition of a politician. You know what it is? Anyone know Latin? Poly, which is many, and ticks, politics, many blood-sucking insects. And so that's what, I hope I didn't insult anybody, but that's what politics is about, and they will absolutely take you off your game, if you will. And I think that if anything, what I could tell you is we don't know what interest rates will be. We don't know who the next president is. But if you're willing to use a set of diagnostic tools, you could actually determine who are the best companies and worst companies now. So Larry Burke is setting off maybe that means something, but more questions, please. If anyone needs to catch a bus or a train, let me just share one other thing though, which I think is really important. One of my businesses has been for years selling the magnet list to other portfolio managers. So if anybody here would like their own portfolio manager, there's probably nobody here that doesn't have a securities account, that doesn't have 2 or 3 or 4 brokers already. But if anybody would like their current portfolio scored on Magnet to find out exactly what your companies rank out on Magnet and which are the best companies, what I simply do is, this is complimentary. When I used to be a retail broker back with Payne Weber and A.G. Edwards, I'd say to people, you know Bethesda Hospital where the president gets a physical? Well, what if you could get a physical there for free? How many people would show up? Of course you would. Well, who wouldn't want their own portfolio scored off Magnet just to see how the stocks rank? So what I just encourage you is, in the back of the room, we put down just a 1-page sheet of paper with a business card. Anyone who would either like to know when Jeff Hirsch, myself, is going on a Fox or CNBC, or more importantly, because this is your money, how your portfolio ranks out according to Magnet, we'd happy to help you complimentary. And I'd also like to say that celebrating our 15th year of friendship and business relationships, Larry and I have an office on 55th and Madison. What we talked about is, rather than being invited back every couple years, why don't we have some wine and cheese parties together, stay current with each other, be our guest, come up to our office in Midtown, and just get to know each other better. And it doesn't need to be formal. No one's a movie star, no one's unapproachable. Just come, we'll have some wine and we'll cheese and we'll talk. And it's a gorgeous office on 55th and Madison. We're all welcome. So I do not have a train to catch. I have a late curfew tonight. Anybody that does, that's great. It's really been my absolute pleasure, and we hope to see you all again soon. Oh, come on.
Jordan, in appreciation for your time and your comments, I'd like
Well,
to give you that. Thank you.
it's an honor to be here. It's one of my favorite venues, folks. And although I received the guest, I'm around for more questions. Thank you, Ted. Thank you, Arlene. The keys to the Ferrari, well, we'll leave it in the garage another night. All right? Anybody else, or who had a book coming to them that I held back? Don't let me do that. I'll get a bad reputation. All right? Please enjoy it. Thank you, Joe. All righty? Thank you so much, everybody. I'll stay around with any questions. All right. Thank you so much.